Hi everyone! So if you have followed my Season 24 progress so far, you have seen me play a lot of support monk actually. And initially we were going for the Firebirds plus Wave of Light double DPS meta for speedruns, but it turns out gearing the Wave of Light monk is a bit harder than gearing a Firebird wizard because of various requirements that are simply very difficult to beat, and it just went much better when we went with the triple support setup. So this is what we have been doing for the better part of the season so far, and it is definitely extremely strong. Not as good as something like double Firebirds Wizard for speed farming, but it gets quite close. We have also pushed rank 1 foreman with this so far actually. We've done 150 in 10 minutes, and this was without trying very much. This was essentially a 2-key push. Got a decent map, got a decent conduit and stuff. But in the end, this can definitely go down to something like 7 minutes or so at as little as like 2.5k paragons. And this is not even like the real foreman meta setup. So support monk definitely has a bit of a spot here in the meta, and you can also run this, for example, with a witch doctor. So especially at lower paragons, when the witch doctors are a bit squishy, this might be a great idea to be included instead of a ZDH, for example. The big advantages of the zMonk compared to other supports like the Demon Hunter, for example, are the defensive buffs that you bring. So first of all, you have the Inner Sanctuary, which gives a 55% damage reduction to everyone in this radius. So this alone is already massive. This cuts the damage in half, and you have some other buffs that come from your inners 4-piece that give you all mantras. So especially everyone gets a bit of auras, and also all enemies around you take a little bit more damage. And you have some extra life regen on top of this. But also there's the Mantra of Healing. And this is also another extremely important ability that shields your fellow teammates. And you can use this to keep up Squirt's Necklace on the DPS players. So this is kind of the main reason to include a zMonk, is that you can use a Squirt's Necklace on classes that otherwise have no shielding mechanic, or not a strong enough shielding mechanic to survive hits consistently, or use their own shields to protect the Squirt's Necklace. So this is your main job, while in the Rift you want to keep this spammed all the time. You can do this up to twice a second, so essentially when you just hold it down, you will have this little animation and your spirit will slowly drop. But for example, when you have Epiphany, you can easily out-regen this, and you can also choose a passive Chant of Resonance that gives 50% cost reduction to your mantra. So this is not a big deal. Essentially what I do when I play this, I just numlock this, so you can use the numlock trick. So in case you're not aware how this works, you go to your key bindings, you select your action bar skill 1 for example, and you put it on your numpad. And like this, I can press it with my numpad, and I can hold down this number 1 on the numpad and press the num lock, and this will numlock it and auto cast it as long as you don't press any other buttons. You see that, for example, when I attack with right click, it will actually not cast the mantra as long as I hold down, for example, shift and right click right now. But when I release it, it will automatically resume the spam. So essentially, while in a run, I just tap to attack, but I don't actually hold down my attacks, and it will automatically renew the mantra at all times whenever you have resources, which should not be an issue. Usually I don't really like automating stuff like this, but in this case it is definitely really annoying to push this mantra twice a second for eternity, so you definitely don't want to do this. Now in terms of group buffs, it depends a little bit on what else you're going to do with your setup. So there can be some speedier versions, there can be some slower versions. I'm going to show you the speedrun variation that I have. So this one uses an Ingeum. I also have an Ethereal here. This is from Season 24. The Ethereal items has another 25% damage reduction effect, which is quite useful. And you can roll some power like Messerschmitt's Reaver. This is not really required, so this is definitely overkill in terms of cooldown reduction, but it helps a little bit to reset your stuff. And we have, for example, Cyclone Strike. So one of the other advantages, especially in fast runs, when you do like 3-minute runs or 2-minute runs, is you have Cyclone Strike with a really large range. Implosion has a 34 yards pull radius, but it only pulls 16 enemies at a time, which usually is almost enough for the entire room when you run to a new room and you try to pull stuff together. So this is much larger pull radius than something like the Barbarian with the Ground Stomp or Necromancer with Briggs Wrath, but it can't pixel stack enemies. So it does group up stuff nicely, but you do lose a bit of the value. But especially for fast runs, this is extremely strong because you can make pulls extremely quickly. You can also use the Cyclone Strike to activate the strong arm bracers, so this is a straight up 30% additive damage buff for your party. This is very useful. And otherwise you have like very typical support items, for example Oculus rings. You can also run to Flavor or Ronda's Locket, and in some cases you could even go with something like Nemesis bracers when there's no one else running them, so you can just easily include those. And there's, for example, Executioner that gives the 10% execute effect. Now, one very important thing to know about the support monk is that the secondary rolls actually matter on your items, at least some of them. So you can see here on this ring I have an ancient ring and it has health glow bonus, and health glow bonus is extremely effective to improve your shielding ability. As you can see on this mantra of healing, this scales with your health glow bonus and improves the shield by 15% of that value. So you can roll the stat on the shoulders, the chest, the boots, the shield, and also all 3 jewelry slots. So in total 7 items. And the perfect value they can get is 270,000. And for example here I have 250,000, which is a very good value already. So when you have everything like mostly ancients, you're gonna have something like this. And obviously 15% bonus of 250,000 is quite massive on a shield that otherwise would only give 62,000. You can go like 90,000 plus all the way up to like around 100,000 or so on your shield, and you can spend this twice a second. So the support monk that used to be more of a heal monk in the past, these days is like a damage reduction shield monk. And you want to make sure that your DPS players never take any damage. Now there are some ways to improve this even further. So here's the high GR version that I'm playing for the 150 pushes. And for example here, instead of dash, I have Serenity of Tranquility. So this gives you a few second immunity, but also places another shield on your allies that gives 120,000 damage absorbed, and it scales with 40% of your health glow bonus. So in my case I get another 100k bonus for a 220k shield that stacks with the mantra. So essentially you try to use this whenever you see that there's a bit more danger, or when your DPS has to reposition and run out of sanctuary and these kind of things. You press that button and then you use the obsidian ring of the zodiac to reset it as fast as possible to press it again and again. Some other changes that I have made here, for example, is that I replaced the Cyclone Strike. We have a Crippling Wave here. This has the Concussion Rune for 20% damage reduction. And here's also the Exploding Palm with the Flesh is weak. So this is quite useful because it also gives 15% additive damage. It's one of the very few additive damage buffs that a monk can bring. So I actually use this in both setups here. In the speed version I have the Gangdu gear, so I try to snipe some low HP target, it will die and then it will spread the palm to everything. And here I just have the Uliana 2-piece bonus, so since there's no Cyclone Strike we don't need to defend the shoulders, and we just cube illusory boots to be able to move around instead of another bracer. Usually these runs are also quite slow paced, so in Geon doesn't make much sense, so you can go with something like a Storm Shield, and here you also have this higher health glow value. In general there are a lot of different variations of zMonk. This is just 2 versions here that I've described. There's also something, for example, with Tempest Rush and Bonkum Lao to proc Cyclone Strikes continuously, and kind of very interesting setups, but usually they all work the same. So it's about shielding, it's about inner sanctuary, and then maybe bringing some other buffs like a Nemesis Bracer, like a Cyclone Strike, and some small stuff like the Resolve with 20% damage reduction, or the Concussion with 20% damage reduction. Or for example there's others DPS that have Ancient Path and Defenders equipped, so Tsunami is a really good option. Or you can even play setups with Deadly Reach, Piercing Trident, where when you wait for the Barbarian to ground stop the entire pull together, and then you do this one attack combo here to apply a knockback effect to all enemies, which will also proc a stronger effect, but without having the Cyclone Strike on the bar. So there are a lot of options, and in general zMonk is always a kind of decent option. It hasn't really changed much in the past, and ever since the ZDH came in, zMonk has not really had much of a place in the meta, because the offensive buffs are worth more than defensive buffs usually. But especially early on in the season, or when you just don't have other options, there's always a way to fit one in and have kind of similar results. If you want to see some gameplay with this build, you can go and check out my GR150 clears. I've uploaded some videos and also some speedruns here and there from season 24, so go check that out. And in the end it's quite straightforward. It's mostly about the mantra, putting Inner Sanctuary exactly on your teammates, especially DPS players, and then maybe doing some other things like pulling with Cyclone Strike here and there. And that's already all for this guide, so I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're gonna have a great season, and I'll see you guys next time.